Turn to 1 Corinthians 10. Hope you got your Bible because we're going to be reading some scripture.
We're down, guys, in 1 Corinthians 10.
Maybe. Since you were so inquisitive, I'm going to have you read 1 Corinthians 10, starting with verse 1. And you're going to read through verse 13 for us, please.
Okay. For I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud, and that they all passed through the sea. They were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. They all ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual milk. For they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them. Their bodies were scattered in the wilderness.
I wonder if there's some bad news.
Now these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. We should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 of them died. We should not test Christ, as some of them did, and they were killed by snakes. And do not grumble, as some of them did, and were killed by the destroying angel. These things happened to them as examples and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the culmination of the ages has come. So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will provide a way out so you can endure it.
So we started with this because we are going to be going back into the Old Testament, but Paul tells us that these are written for us as examples to try to warn us and to try to help us to realize that there are things that God's not pleased with. Verse 5, nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them. Okay? And so we're going to be studying a story from the Old Testament that is exactly what Paul was writing about here. And so I hope that it's something that we can read, that we can gain wisdom from, and that we can apply in our lives, because we want to be mindful that sometimes we think we can be standing firm, and that's when we might be susceptible to temptation to make us fall. So let's turn to Numbers 16, Numbers chapter 16, and we're going to read about some dudes named Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and On. But
Do they get used to Gail did a series of video lessons probably 2 or 3 years ago on a Wednesday night. It was a video series like he took 2 of them and they were together, and they were like sins and different things that people had gotten involved in and how they got to that point. And it was really interesting. Yeah.
so what is it? What's spurring your thought?
That the whole thing just then in 1 Corinthians about how easily and each, the series covered like 12 or 13 different things that they were saying about how we have to keep our guard up, because it could easily happen and we would never dream.
Yeah. So we're in number 16. Let me just remind you, okay, so this is after a couple of years that they've been in the desert, that God took them up to the promised land. Okay, if we turn back over to, let's see, chapter 13. And then they went out to explore the promised land, and then they came back, gave a bad report, and then you know what happened and all of that. So all of that has already happened. So he took them to the promised land, and then they didn't go in. So now they're going back out into the desert. And there's been several episodes of people grumbling and God killing a bunch of people because they grumbled. So anyways, now here we are in Numbers 16. We're going to read verses 1 through 35. So I just like to go around, everybody read 2 or 3 verses, and we'll just go through 1 through 35. Nikki, you want to start?
Sure.
We can go this way, go counterclockwise.
Okay, this is number 16:1. Korah, son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and certain Reubenites, Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and the son of Peleth, become insolent.
I gave you those on purpose.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And rose up against Moses. With them were 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders who had been appointed members of the council.
I'm going to just stop there for just a second. And I'm not going to stop as we're reading through this, but wanted to just remind you that Korah was the son of Levi. Okay, so Levi were the tribe that was set apart for God. Matter of fact, just keep your finger there, turn over to Numbers 8. Numbers chapter 8. And I'm going to start reading in verse 18. Numbers 8:18. And I have taken the Levites in place of all the firstborn sons in Israel. This is God talking. Of all the Israelites, I have given the Levites as gifts to Aaron and his sons to do the work at the tent of meeting on behalf of the Israelites, to make atonement for them, so that no plague will strike the Israelites when they go near the sanctuary. Moses, Aaron, and the whole Israelite community did with the Levites just as the Lord commanded Moses. The Levites purified themselves and washed their clothes, and Aaron presented them as a wave offering before the Lord and made atonement for them to purify them. After that, the Levites came to do their work at the tent of meeting under the supervision of Aaron and his sons. They did with the Levites just as the Lord had commanded Moses. So God had set the Levites apart, and they were the ones that did the work all around the tabernacle. And the different clans had different duties. Some of them they were in charge of all of the utensils and stuff like that. Some of them were in charge of taking down all of the coverings and carrying that. Some of them were in charge of carrying actually the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, and so that's who we're talking about. Now the Reubenites were not part of that clan. They weren't part of the Levites. So we got some of the Levites, and then we got some other people, prominent people in the community, that are all getting together. And it said that they became insolent. Okay, it's not a word that we use very commonly. So I actually looked up the definition of insolent, and it means this: showing a rude and arrogant lack of respect. Okay, all right. So I think we were at verse 3. Let's keep reading.
They came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly?"
When Moses heard this, he fell face down. Then he said to Korah and all of his followers, In the morning, the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy. And he will have that person come near him. The man he chooses, he will cause to come near him. You, Korah, and all your followers are to do this. Take censers, and tomorrow put fire and incense in them before the Lord. The man the Lord chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far.
Moses also said to Korah, now listen, you Levites, isn't it enough that for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the Israelite community and brought you near him himself to do the work of the Lord's tabernacle and to stand before the community and minister to them? He has brought you and all your fellow Levites near him, but now you're trying to get the priesthood. Too. It is against the Lord that you and all your followers have banded together. Who is Aaron that you should grumble against him?
Then Moses summoned Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab. But they said, we will not come. Isn't it enough that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness? And now you also want to lord it over us? Moreover, you haven't brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, or given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Do you want to treat these men like slaves? No, we will not come.
Then Moses became very angry. He said to the Lord, do not accept their offering. I have not taken so much as a donkey from them, nor have I wronged any of them. Moses said to Korah, you and all your followers are to appear before the Lord tomorrow, you and they and Aaron. Each man is to take his censer and put incense in it, 250 censers in all, and present it before the Lord. You and Aaron are to present your censers also.
So every man took his censer and put fire in them, and laid incense on them, and stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting with Moses and Aaron. Then Korah assembled all the congregation against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation.
The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, separate yourselves from this assembly so I can put an end to them at once. But Moses and Aaron fell face down and cried, O God, the God who gives breath to all living things, will you be angry with the entire assembly when only one man sins? Then the Lord said to Moses, say to the assembly, move away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram.
Moses got up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. He warned the assembly, move back from the tents of these wicked men. Do not touch anything belonging to them, or you will be swept away because of all of their sins. So they moved away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Dathan and Abiram had come out and were standing with their wives, children, and little ones at the entrance to their tents.
Moses said, by this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these deeds, for this is not my doing. If these men die the death of all men, or if they suffer the fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about an entirely new thing, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that is theirs, and they descend alive into Sheol, then you shall understand that these men have spurned the Lord.
As soon as he finished saying all this, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them, with their households and all Korah's men and all their possessions. They went down alive into the grave with everything they owned. The earth closed over them, and they perished and were gone from the community.
At their cries, all the Israelites around them fled, shouting, the earth is going to swallow us too. The fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering the incense.
What was their complaint against Moses?
He didn't have the land flowing with milk and honey. Just ironic.
Yeah. So it is funny that you go back and look at verse 13. They have a very short memory. Isn't it enough that you've brought us up out of this land flowing with milk and honey. Is he talking about Egypt?
Slaves.
Yeah, they were slaves. Land flowing with milk and honey. And then he says, you didn't deliver. You said you were going to take us to a land of milk and honey. You didn't. Okay, we just went back and looked. It's like, I don't know how much time it was, but it was just 2 chapters ago that they're like, he took them to the promised land. And because they didn't believe God could do it for them, God said, okay. Yeah. So it is funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting that they say, okay, you took us from a land flowing with milk and honey, and then you didn't take us into a land. Okay? So maybe they say he's not delivering on his promises. What else?
Say, I'm not sure what this is referring to, but they say, do you want to treat these men like slaves? They're accusing him of, I guess, using the Levites as slaves to do the work of the temple. In verse 14.
Yeah. Yeah, mine says, will you gouge out the eyes of these men? So not sure exactly what that means.
Well, Moses accused them of trying to steal the priesthood.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the division of like you're talking about the different tasks within the whole Levite clan.
Yeah.
The different, or I guess tribe, and then the different clans had different jobs.
Yeah.
And Korah was belly aching because he didn't get to serve as a priest.
Yeah. So Aaron and his sons were the ones that were those were the ones that could go into the most holy place. But Korah couldn't. I think the Korathites, I think they are the ones that would carry the Ark of the Covenant and those things on the poles and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah. So Moses kind of says, now you're trying to gain the priesthood and not just do the work around the tabernacle. But I'm not sure exactly that.
It seems like they were expecting inheritance of land.
Yeah.
That hadn't been realized yet, really because of their own fault.
Yeah, well, keep in mind that the Levites didn't get any land. That was the whole deal when they get everything got divvied up, they didn't get a territory when they actually did get to take Canaan.
They got pasture lands. It's kind of interesting because every city, they would have like 1,000 cubits or something of pasture land around it, but it really wasn't theirs.
Right.
Yeah,
And
because
they were not eat all the offerings, like those offerings. They got really a good deal.
yeah, they did. Yeah, all of those things that the people would bring, then they would get the best portion, I guess, the thigh and the breast and the whatever of this, that was their portion, So
What's amazing to me is how boldly they could rebel against Moses after wandering in the wilderness with Moses and seeing what happened to people who opposed Moses and God. That's what violated the army of Pharaoh, and I mean he's there with
Aaron and
them,
Miriam.
and God appears to them.
Yeah.
And they're still like, forget you.
Miriam, it reminds me a lot of the story of Miriam and Aaron, because God told Miriam and Aaron, who are you to speak against my servant Moses, who I speak to, not like the prophets, in dreams and visions, but face to face. And then Moses said, who are you to speak against Aaron? But I think it said that they accused him of setting himself up above the whole, how's it worded? The whole
Assembly, yeah. Verse 3, they said, the whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with him. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly? So they're saying, okay, you're setting yourself up as higher than everybody else. Verse 13, it says, my version says, and now you also want to lord it over us. Okay? So not delivering on your promises, and even yours, Jess, as you were talking about, treat us like slaves. Okay, they were really slaves in Egypt. That was really slavery. And now they're saying, okay, we have to carry this, or we have to do the work around the tabernacle. You're treating us like slaves. You're lording it over us. You're making yourself higher than everybody else. Okay, that's their complaints.
Kind of stomping their foot and saying, we don't want to be told what to do.
There you go.
So you have a problem with authority.
Yeah.
And there was other times when they complained about the food, they would say, oh, in Egypt, we had lox and melons and, all these things, and they just forgot about how oppressive it was.
Yeah.
They were all dying because they wouldn't, they were making them feel about straw.
So what can we learn from this? What tactics did they use? Did these, it's kind of interesting that you read in verse 1, you read about Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and On. And then we never read about On anymore. You never hear about On after that. So I don't know if he repented, if he said, no, I'm sorry, I ain't going along with this, or what. That's kind of interesting. But what are the tactics that were used in order to, create this uprising?
It's not that uncommon when somebody's pushing their agenda to speak inflammatory. To speak in inflammatory language to draw support.
Yeah.
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
To me, that's kind of what I'm seeing, just a lot of pride and not content with their position. And so I'm gonna inflame all the things that might have been good in Egypt to recognize how bad we have it now, when in reality it's not true.
Yeah.
And they try to convince people that they deserve better. You deserve better. You shouldn't be treated like this. You need to.
They banded together
Yes.
250 other
You don't have to
people.
take this. You should.
Yeah.
You're better.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny that they're pointing out Moses and Aaron as the ones that are leading the people. I mean, God's still at this time leading them with a cloud during the day and fire at night. So to say that, yes, God chose Moses and Aaron to be above the people, to lead the people, but it's still God that's leading them. And it's kind of funny that they're pointing out an individual rather than saying, hey, God's doing this, let's go against God.
It is interesting, just human nature. Let's just say you put a group of people, together in a community, in a room, or whatever. Do you think that people really can live without leadership? At some point in time, someone kind of has to take the lead, don't you think? Because then everybody is just going to be doing what anybody and everybody wants to do. So if you live together in community, whatever it is, if it's just a community and you're just wanting to, maybe it's an agrarian community or whatever it is, at some point you're going to have some people that agree to something. You're probably going to have someone that leads. So there has to be at some point some leadership. Now, that leadership can be elected, like we supposedly do in America or whatever, they can be appointed. But so let's start learning, let's start applying, how do we feel about leadership? What are our attitudes? How do we sometimes treat leaders with a rude or arrogant lack of respect? Let's just kind of get it out there. As I was studying for this last night, I went in and I had to apologize to Ty and Jana because we had been talking about somebody that we had been talking badly about somebody that was a leader, not a leader for me, but I was just observing something. And I'm sitting there speaking bad, and then I go back and I'm reading about this. I'm like, okay, I gotta apologize. Because I was treating someone rudely and without respect. Why does that happen to us? How do we fall into that trap?
Well, leader's only as good as the recognition that he gets from the people he's leading for the most part. And that requires a degree of humility on everybody's part. And that's what Korah did not have. He did not possess a whole lot of humility. And that's part of, you got to recognize your lot in life. And if somebody's willing to lead, you got to be appreciative of them taking that opportunity and give them their chance.
Do we do that? Or do we many times shoot arrows?
It's like when we were talking about, humility is such a key. You've heard good followers make good leaders. Well, I think people that understand a respect and humility for positions and leadership positions, and like Toby was talking, we were talking about, really it's emotional dishonesty, it's lying, being deceitful. When you embellish, when you try to, we've all done it. Yeah, and something I read, it was either a Devo on YouVersion or one of those Chris Seedman deals, but it stuck with me. That is the language of Satan. When we do that, he is the great deceiver. And so what you're talking about, I think humility, and I think honesty. Being honest and not trying to, embellish things to sway people's opinions. It's okay to have influence, but it needs to be done honestly and for the right purposes. But being good followers, there's lots of leaders that are good, that are potentially good leaders that can't be, they're ineffective because the who's following.
Moses was an awesome leader. He was very humble. I mean, how many times did Moses fall face down before God to save the people? I'd like to keep count of that sometime, because I think I can remember at least 8 or 10 times where he just fell face down. Like, God, please don't kill him off. He was a great leader. What about leaders that aren't that great?
Well, that's one thing I was thinking about, because, that's the hard thing. Obviously, not a good leader, just being silent and not saying anything. So then I was thinking about, well, how did Jesus handle that? Well, he very obviously, but, approached or rebuked leaders that were poor leaders. But I don't think that he ever did it behind their back. I think it was always to them that he did it. And he didn't do it in a way or with a motive of shaming them. His motive was their eternal best and the eternal best of the people that they were influencing.
He didn't band together a bunch of people to try to overthrow them.
Much to their disappointment. They were ready for that type of guy, and he didn't give that type of leadership.
Yeah.
He rose to the proper occasion at the proper time. I mean, he was bold at different times. There's lots of times we can see where Jesus was humble, and he didn't have that arrogance and aggressive leadership style. And there's a balance there. It's just like I said, the followers need to have humility. The leaders do too. There's a balance there. And Jesus had the perfect set of it.
Time's up. Let's end with a prayer. Father, we thank you for this lesson, for this story about Korah, Abiram, Dathan, and on. May we look at it and examine our lives and see if we are doing anything similar to that, and help us, Father, to repent from that type of attitude. Help us not to speak poorly of people who are in positions of authority. If we think that they're doing something that's not right, help us to go to them personally and speak to them with respect. Help us also to do what Jesus did and just entrust ourselves to you, who is the proper judge, and that you will take vengeance when vengeance needs to be taken, but that you know all things. And so many times we are speaking from a position of ignorance. And so please forgive us. Give us the wisdom, give us the discernment and the guidance, give us patience, help us to hold our tongue. Give us insight into what leaders go through, and to be graceful, give them grace. And help us actually to be good leaders, Father, with humility, as been mentioned numerous times today. And help us to lead with people's best interests in mind, or their eternal interest in mind. Help us not to lead from any sort of position to gain anything personally, or take advantage of anybody because of power or position or authority. It's in Jesus' name we pray.